Hi everyone, this is Mindy Eggen. Welcome to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be creating two cards from the brand new Gina K Designs release for April 2025. Now, these are the two cards that I'm going to be recreating for you in the video. One of the things I really want to share with you is this color combination that I came up with. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then I'm also going to be creating my own metallic cardstock using white polyglaze. So first, let's jump into the stamping and ink blending. I am using the hand-picked flowers bundle. It has this large, gorgeous floral, and then I'm also going to be using the small floral set as well. So I have some layering weight white cardstock from Gina K Designs in that I placed in my Misti stamping tool, and I'm going to do my go-to technique, which is I'm going to stamp it first in a light shade of ink, and then when I'm done ink blending, I'm going to stamp over the top again with a black ink to bring all those outlines back in. The reason I like doing this is then I don't risk smearing anything and I'm getting the true color of ink in my ink blends. The key thing is I want to make sure I am always placing my cardstock back into the same position. Now, the little trick here is that I wanted to have three of those small floral clusters. So I have another piece of white cardstock that's cut to 4¼ by 5½. I'm going to stamp just that small cluster in the top. I'm going to remove my cardstock from this sticky mat that I have in here from my Sweet Petunia. I'm going to just rotate that and stamp it again. That way I don't have to move any of my stamps. And to do the inking, I am using skeleton leaves from Gina K Designs. Now that I have my images stamped, I'm just going to place the cover over that sticky mat and then set my Misti off on the side. To do the ink blending, I'm going to start with Peach Bellini. And this is such a pretty color. It adds such a warm hue to the flowers. I am using a large blending brush to apply that color over the first layer of the stencil. Now I do have my cardstock stuck down to that double background stamp. It's the back side of it that Gina uses as a sticky mat. And it's also holding down not only my cardstock, but also the stencil. Now I'm going to come in with medium orchid and a smaller blending brush, and I'm going to brush this just on the one side of the flower. Now, what I wanted to achieve is I wanted that warm glow, which is the peach Bellini, but I also wanted like a mulberry or wine color. So I did some Googling on what colors I would need to do that. And I came up with that orchid color and then going over the top with red velvet. And it created the most perfect kind of mulberry wine color. But I am going to bring in a little bit of dark lilac just around those outer edges where that kind of mulberry color started. So that way it's giving it a little bit more contrast. And I absolutely love this color combination. I'm going to have to make sure to write this down somewhere so I don't forget. I removed the first layer of the stencil. I'm bringing in the second layer, which is going to be coloring in three more flowers on this set. And I'm going to use the same color combination. So I have the peach Bellini first, that's my base color, the medium orchid on one side, or you could do the whole thing if you wanted the entire flower this color. And then that red velvet. That red velvet was really key going over the top of the orchid to give it that wine color, and then a little bit of the dark lilac. Now, if you come in too heavy with that dark lilac, it is going to turn it more of a purple than I really wanted. I wanted that wine color. I really didn't want the purple. So you do have to be really careful. You may want to use a detail blending brush for that color just because there's smaller bristles and you have a little bit more control. Now I'm going to move on to that last large flower down there in the bottom, just picking up the stencil and then laying down this next layer. Again, that grip mat is going to hold the stencil in place for me so I don't need to have any extra tape or post-it tape to stick down. Now, if you didn't want to do any stamping, this bundle is available in a Polyglaze sheet, which you would have to pick up separately. So you could do some foiling for your outline instead of stamping. I love playing with different color combinations. And so when you're looking at your inks, you are definitely not limited to just those colors. Just by layering a color over another, you are going to create a whole nother color, which gives you so many more options. Now, for the leaves, I am starting out with lemon drop. I'm going to add kind of a base color to my leaves, giving it another kind of warm glow feeling. And then I'm going to come in with key lime. And you don't have to use all of these colors that I do, but because this is a coloring stencil and not necessarily a layering stencil, I like to step up my ink blending and my images by adding all these different shades. Now, once I had gone in with the key lime, I'm coming in with a little bit of Lucky Clover, and then I'll add just a little smidge of dark spruce, which is going to be kind of at the base of the leaves, again, just to give it that contrast. So I have the tips of the leaves in that lemon drop, and then the base is that dark spruce. Now, once I have this large bouquet all colored in, I'm going to peel up the stencil, and there is my reveal. I just love how that came out. Off screen, I am going to clean off my stencils with a rag and some rubbing alcohol because I need those stencils to color in those smaller bouquets. The smaller bouquets are actually a replica from that big bouquet. So you're going to use the same stencil. There's just a certain part of the stencil you don't need. And I love how versatile Gina made this. It actually took me a minute to figure this out. So I love that she was able to do that and we don't have more stencils than we need. I'm going to be using the same color combination for the smaller flowers as I did in my large bouquet. This one, I probably should have brought in the detail blending brushes because the flowers are not that big and it's just a little easier to control when you have smaller bristles. Again, I'm using those same colors for the leaves, kind of doing a brush of the lemon drop, coming in slightly with the lucky clover. I think I actually skipped key lime just because, again, there's not a lot of room there and really just dusting over it. Off screen, I did do the same thing for the other two small floral sets that I have. And now that everything is done, I'm going to bring this back over to my Misti. I'm starting with those two that I had stamped on the flip side. I place that up in the top corner, which is where I started, and I'm stamping over the top with a black ink to bring that outline back in. Once in a while, I think on one of these, you can see there is a slight gap in there, but that was just more of operator error because I didn't line the stencil up perfectly, but I don't think it's not that noticeable, and I think it actually kinda adds a slight natural highlight to the flowers. Then I placed my large cardstock back in my Misti. This one is tucked down in the bottom left-hand corner and inking up it again once more with the black ink and stamping that down to bring in all of the details of the flowers. I had a little bit of open space at the top, so I picked out a sentiment off of the hand-picked flowers set, and I'm stamping that down in the black ink as well. So here is a look at both panels that I have stamped and ready to go. I'm going to set these off on the side to just dry for a second so I don't smear any of that black ink, and I'm going to work on some foiling. I have been keeping all of my fancy foils in this binder. I think it's like a 6x8 or 6x9 binder. And this is actually how I store my stencils too. And I just recently switched my foil over to it. So I am going to pick out the lemon drop, which is, I think, my brand new favorite instead of a 14 karat gold, which was my previous favorite. I love this lemon drop. And then I'm also going to pull out some of the white polyglaze. The white polyglaze is going to allow me to create my own foiled cardstock or own metallic cardstock. So I picked out the white polyglaze and I'm trimming this down to about the size that this window die is. This window die comes out of the Master Layouts 20, which is brand new. So I trimmed that down. I'm also trimming down a sheet of that lemon drop fancy foil. So while I'm trimming down my foil, I do have my fuse foiling system warming up. I have it on setting 3, and once the light is green, it is ready to go. So I have a sentiment from the hand-picked flowers polyglaze sheets trimmed out. It's one of the sentiments. There's a few different ones in there, and also a small piece of that lemon drop fancy foil. So I dusted the back of the foil with a Swiffer cloth and the top of the polyglaze, and then I placed it so that the pretty side of the foil faces up and my sentiment faces up. I ran that through the fuse, and then I can peel and reveal and have this perfectly foiled sentiment with lots of amazing shine. There is a coordinating die for this, so I will set this off on the side and just do all of my die cutting at once. Now, with the white polyglaze, there is kind of a dull side and a side that is a little shinier or shiny. And we want the shiny side. So I'm buffing that with my Swiffer cloth. I buffed the back of my fancy foil with that Swiffer. And then I'm placing this so that the shiny side of the white polyglaze is facing up and the pretty side of my fancy foil is facing up. Then I can place this in my carrier sheet. You do want to make sure you don't have any of that white polyglaze exposed because once you run it through the fuse, it'll transfer to your carrier sheet. I already have a little sliver of it on my carrier sheet. I don't mind that, but you don't want big chunks because it'll transfer and then it could kind of get in the way or obstruct your view. But typically not a big deal. So once I ran that through, I'm going to carefully peel this back. And now I have my own shiny metallic cardstock. It is stunning. And you can see by the leftover piece that it came out absolutely perfect. Now I can work on a bunch of die cutting. So I'm going to dig out my Intri-Cut machine. I also have the magnetic platforms in here. I'm going to start with the window, which again is from the Master Layouts 20 die set. I'm going to die cut that out and I'm going to have such a shiny window frame. It is so beautiful. I'm also going to go ahead and die cut my sentiment that I had foiled. Now, even though it is a magnetic surface, I have trust issues, so I hold everything down with tape because honestly, I'm a klutz and I don't have a ton of elbow room. So I like to just play it safe and hold everything down with a low tack tape. While I was die cutting, I also die cut out another one of these big floral bouquets out of white cardstock. I'm going to layer these two together using some liquid glue. This is just the large bottle of Connect glue that I placed inside of a fine tip bottle. I also die cut extra of the sentiments so I could layer those together as well, and also that window frame. The window frame, I ended up just putting little dots in between some of the window frame panels or where they connect into the four corners or crosshairs, just small areas, dot, dot, not a lot. So I have those all glued together. Now I can start putting some of these cards together. I have a piece of jelly bean green cardstock cut to 4¼ by 5½ placed in my Misti tool. I'm going to use this beautiful scripty background. This is from the vintage spring stamp set, which is brand new from the April release. And I placed it right in the center. It gave just a perfect border around the edge. And I stamped it in jelly bean green ink for a tone on tone look. Now, I'm sorry, I kind of am jumping around a little bit. I'm trying to get as many pieces done as I can while waiting for dry times. Here, I brought in my flowers and that stamped background, and I'm splattering them with some white paint just for some added interest. Now, while that dries, I am working on the background for my second card. This I'm using the brick stencil, and I have medium carnation ink that I'm going to stencil that background on. Now, I really just need the edges. I don't necessarily need to worry about the center because I'm going to be die cutting that anyway, and my window is going to go in the centerpiece. Now I'm going to jump back to my other card just because this one's pretty quick to finish off now that the splatters are dry. I have a card base that I created using heavyweight cardstock from Gina K Designs. I added tape runner to it and I'm placing that jelly bean green panel over the top. Then I'm going to add liquid glue behind my large bouquet and I'm going to place this onto my card front. And this is just perfect. You can just kind of see hints of that elegant script back there. With this large of a bouquet, I would recommend putting something large on it and letting it sit for a second, like maybe your Misti if you have one, or even a book, just to make sure that it adheres down really well first. And then I'm bringing in my foiled sentiment, added liquid glue to that, and place that over the top. And that's something too, I would put something heavy on and just let that sit for a few seconds. Now I can come back and finish my window card. So I took that brick background. I actually die cut that panel from the Master Layouts 12. I think there was a stitched rectangle in there that I had used. So I die cut out from that. And then I die cut out the window from the center of my panel. That's going to give me an opening for my window. And the reason I wanted that opening is because I wanted to add a little bit of ink blending to the background. So I have a piece of white cardstock cut to the same size as that brick background. And I lightly ink blended some lemon drop ink to give it kind of that glowing feeling in the background. Now I can take my tape runner, I'm adding it to the back of my brick panel that I stenciled and place that over the top. Now this would be really, really cool as a shaker card. I may try that in a different card project, but for right now, I'm taking my layered window, I'm adding liquid glue to to the back, and I'm placing this in that opening. Again, you're going to want to set something heavy on it and let that sit for a second. I do want to add just a little bit more dimension to this, so I'm adding foam tape to the back of that panel, And then after I remove the backing from that foam tape, I can place this on an A2 size card panel. I like mine side folding, and I'm just going to make sure that my margins are even going around the edges. Now, for the flowers, I did have to be a little bit careful with this. So I wanted to have the three bundles down at the bottom edge of my window. And what I did is I trimmed down some small foam squares and I added those behind my flower for one, to give it to stability. And two, I wanted that to kind of be in between those window panes. So I did have to be a little bit mindful of it. It was probably the most tedious part, really, of the whole thing. And then my last one that I'm adding in the center, I just added straight on with the liquid glue. And once again, I like to place something heavy on it and give that a second or two to sit. And then I'm finishing it off with a sentiment in the top part of the window. Again, just a mix of liquid glue and the foam squares. And then that is going to finish up this card. I love these dainty flowers. It's kind of like a little flower bed in front of your window, but creating your own metallic cardstock is so satisfying and it's so, so shiny. And then here is the first card I created where I did the large floral bouquet in the center over that script background. Now, I'm going to have all of my supplies used in the video today linked down below in the video description and over on my blog. I also am going to link to my walkthrough of the release where I am sharing even more inspiration. Thank you all so much for joining me today, and I will see you again real soon.